Alrighty, I'm just gonna pick up where I left off yesterday. This morning I did a few little updates to just this bass noise function. So at the moment you can see, I mean this is what it was like last night. At the moment you can see it's pretty straight. Yes, it does go up and down in places, some less than others, but overall, like from a distance it evens out. It's only up closer you see that variation, and even then sometimes like here, I know it's still going up and down, but it wasn't really doing what I wanted still. So I'm going to just jump into the material function and show exactly what I've added. At the moment you're not seeing it live, so that is just what it was like last night, but here's what I've done. This is an iteration on something I tried to begin with, which was just to pull in the world position X after it was divided, to soften it a little bit by dividing and then using that. At the time it was just adding in and pulling that into the noise. So obviously this is the noise, that's just the streaks going sideways. What that's really doing, what I wanted it to do was to start changing the angle a little bit, and where it initially started was just literally, I would just crop that bit out. In fact, I might just go all the X directly. Though I can just show exactly what the process was. It doesn't just end up the way it is. It was like this. So you're not really seeing much there. See a bit there. So it's just in the X on one angle. And how that ended up looking, I'll let that reload. Bang. You don't see much of it, but you can see in some places, depending on the angle, it streaks a little bit. And this one's a bit muted still because I've already changed the material instance parameters. So the next one, to pull it back to what it was like, instead of pulling in from there, I started using both the X and the Y together to get a bit more happening. See there, it's happening all over. You'll also see if I put it into circle, it's basically just putting everything on an angle. Now, that's at the noise texture, and that's without applying all this dot product and blending and all that sort of stuff. So like this, it looked like that, and yeah, you're not really seeing it still. It's sort of there, but it's not. We're on the right one, I think. And then the last one was to basically use the dot product. So if you're not familiar, hey, how you doing? So if you're not familiar with what the dot product is, basically we've got our vertex normal, and if I preview that, you can see, okay, that's pretty straightforward. Blue is on top, and we're comparing it to blue. Dot product is just saying what is matching. It's like not quite percentage of, but it does cool things. And when you see it on a sphere, or you actually get the sort of gradual difference. So on top is your pure blue. In this case you're seeing it as white because it's just the one channel, and then as it gradually goes down the slope you get a variation there. You actually have a excuse me, I've got a test model which I've used before, and then you can start seeing like just has sort of bits of shading there. Now this is quite extreme as well, like, and that's so excuse me, that's where this bit comes into. So I get to here and see what the dot product gets modified with. You can see it's just creating some places in white, a little bit of grey here and there, and the rest is just black, which means it will be untouched. But we flip that around because we're doing a 1 minus, and then we're saying, okay, all the flat areas are the ones that we want untouched by this XY modification. If I bring that in there, you can see there, I mean, it's sort of straightforward. Pull it in there again, so that with the XY. Now, by having this XY like this, it's not an exact science, it was just really a trial and error thing that worked out well. And then when we plug that in properly, not that one actually, we want, oh no, it is, right, that's what I changed. So that has to go back into the ad. So you can see it's only doing it in a little bit of the area. I think that's it. Might have to refer to the shot I shared earlier. So what else is going on? I might just open that up on Twitter and just confirm I do actually have the right one showing. And it looks kind of like it. So you're seeing the slope there, which is based on the X and Y. So I'm just going to compare. And I might just do it. I'll just follow along. So I think both of the current viewers, both of you guys follow me on Twitter as well. So you would have seen, although there is someone else in there I don't recognise. But basically that is more or less what I had shared. So this box here, multiply going back into the ad, yep, that's all the same. The way I've done this with the incline maximum and that, I keep going in between variable names or parameter names for what they actually are, but it basically means from 0.09, that's when we say that's our cutoff for flatness, and from there we start blending back to 0. So by the time we get to 0.6, that's when it should be more or less back to full strength. And then that's when you get, yeah, so instead of being like it was before, you get this instead, so it's all over the place. But if I throw on the material that I used to demonstrate yesterday as well, because that's also using the same noise function now, pull that in, you can see it looks so much better. You've got, like, there's that variation there that just works really well. I also did a modification to the stratify parameters that were being used. So what this is doing at the moment, if I pull up the smart test, this is using the pre-done functions for rock and stone, which are from the normal landscape material, and blending those together based on this noise function. So that's what's actually doing a lot of the other coloration there. So the reds and the greens and yellows that are there are all based on that. And what I've done with the instance, if I open this up, I've modified it so it basically is doing as close to a full blend as possible, so you actually get those color differences come up in the landscape, like in the flat areas, which means that you can do the cutaway that I wanted to get happening as well, and what that cutaway looks like. But say, okay, there's that brown, I might just drop the size a bit, cut in there, not strong enough I guess. What have I done? I've got the flatten, the slope flatten on, so I'll just cut in there with the flat. You can see there it's kept that yellow. If I cut in instead at the red, it's got the red there. If I try cut in the green, it's a bit thin, so it's a bit spotty. Yeah, it's a bit hard to get that one in, just because it's so thin. See there it's sort of orange, that's because it's sort of blended between the two. It just instantly creates that sort of variation there without too much effort. And technically, once I actually go through the process of replacing these two functions with something that just handles the coloration, I mean, I'd probably do something like this still, but where this goes with Stratify, because I mean most of it's not that interesting. Like the snow cover, I'll try to move to be after, where you're really getting. It's very similar to what is already happening. So I've got generated offset bands, different generated bands, another noise texture. It's more or less doing the same thing, just at a different level. It might actually be possible to say convert that base noise function into something that took function inputs instead, or as well, and then just pass everything through there. That might actually be what needs to happen to make that more reusable. But at the moment this one's taking in the main color, the first streak and the second streak, and then they're just actually passed in through parameters anyway, so that way they can be per custom, because both the rock and the stone layers are using this same function. But this kind of feels like a cheat to be using that function to show what it looks like, but it's, I think, also handy just to actually demonstrate what it can be like. So that's just a simple noise function there. And the other thing too is by use like that coloration there that you get, where it's on the flat surface, that doesn't happen through the Stratify. But you're also seeing that, probably that shakiness of color. I'm assuming everyone's seeing that. Like over there. Yeah, I think it's just competing. I mean, there could be reasons to have it do that, but I'm not sure about that. But something if I just bump that slightly. Yeah, it goes away if you bump it. Just seems to be like it's competing. Yeah. Very strange. Maybe we're at the 0 point too. It's not hard to check. No, it's not a 0 point, it's just, I mean, then again, it could be technically 0 because we're basing on height, and we're like using a device to cut down what level that's happening at. So, yeah, looks cool like this, but I'll flick it back just the regular texture. Just using the noise again, just so you can see what it looks like again. But already it's got quite a bit of variation there. what's next. So what the intent is on this landscape layer is to actually, instead of just plugging in the base noise, it would be to actually use something like this smart test and then blend it in through as extra landscape layers. So if you're not familiar with how that works, there's a material layer blend where you can pass in different material attributes and it will do its thing. And this is the monster that I'm trying to avoid using because it's a 24,000 compile instructions. Shader instructions need to be compiled every time I make even a small change, other than to the instances, of course. So probably not going to make much more of a dent tonight, but what I might do is actually just plot out some of what's going to happen next. So this is going to be the rock stone layer. I'm going to have a landscape layer. It's a layer blend, isn't it? I'm just going to have 3 layers, that's because that's what I want to do with it. So I want to have a base stone layer, which will be the one I'm sort of showing at the moment. I'm going to have a dirt grit layer. The idea of that is being able to paint over what's already there with the dirt. What's already there with the rock and actually get it look nicer through there. And then I want an extra snow ice layer. And so at the moment this is using quite a lot. It's what I could do is just load up the other map as well, just so you can see what that looks like. I'll save everything first because it could take a bit of time. Right, so this whole thing is a bit poorly structured because I've just added and added slowly over time different things, and I haven't really shown much of what it can do recently other than all the occasional screenshots I take with it. So yeah, at the moment this is got just lots of things painted over. If I just hit play, it's going to all go to white because it's got that layer that brings in the snow. So it's got that snow cover in the attribute per level. But yeah, at the moment, go to paint and you'll see just how much of a mess it is. So we're only really using these ones. There are some old non-used ones down here for plants and other stuff, but I think I've now switched to using foliage for that. Might just try it though, just to, yeah, don't really do anything. So I mean that grass that you're seeing there is just from the dirt layer. Obviously need to slow down the scrolling a bit. So what you're seeing is there's a powder snow, which is one type, which looks like that. I've got a dirty snow, which looks like that. Clean snow, that looks like that. And when you start mixing them together, they create a bit of variation there. And that's what you see a lot, but just do this to scroll down a bit and slow it down. So let's get lower too. Was that the spot? Oh, was it here? You can see the way it's doing it now, it's actually using a height blend where previously it was just a weight blend. You can paint into it and it cuts in. So what I'd be looking at is basically something that is those three together, so I'll just pop over somewhere else. It's not being used much. This will do. So I'd have some sort of rock layer. Have some sort of dirt that goes over it in places. And then I'll have the snow layer over the top. I might just drop that a bit. And then just use variations of those, relying a bit more on the fact that both the dirt and the rock layer would create variations. You can even see there I've got a noise happening over the top of the dirt layer as well, so you're getting a bit more variation in colour than might otherwise be there. So you can see, yeah, there it's lighter, there it's darker. That's all controlled by the layers as well, so they pass in what sort of scale that's going to be at. But I like the idea, especially now that I'm using a height blend, if I start just doing a very light snow over the top, you can see it comes in spots rather than being uniform across there, and that's because it's using the height. So it's a much nicer sort of frosting over there, and I'd still want it to be able to go okay. And what would be nice too is if instead of having to pick out 3 different snow types, it just sort of pick them according to noise and that as well. So maybe some are height driven, so maybe the powder one, which is more of the pure white, comes up on the higher level. So you can do that sort of thing too, where you have the gradual height in there. I was thinking of having the ice layer as something sort of reserved more for vertical, and to also have it quite light. But if I just pull back to stone, you'll probably notice this too. If I just hit play, we're only really getting that on top, like the snow layer that comes in is only really on top, it's not really on the sides, and that's because it's using that same sort of dot product thing I showed before, which is what it's what the noise layer was using. It's a little mock-up I did, which is based on one of the concept art pieces. A little frozen lake, although I feel like it's changed again. I didn't think it wasn't that see-through before, so that said, I did also remove the ice texture from the layer there, so that could be why that's happening. So previously it would have looked like ice underneath as well. So instead of actually just jumping back into the into the landscape, because again I'm probably not going to make much progress being that it's after 12 now, I thought I might just jump into something else which is kind of cool, and it's really what's responsible for all of the cool sort of shots that come through. So while it's going, I'll just hit play, pop over to the edge. This is my favourite place to take a screenshot, as you may have seen. Let's speed it up a bit. Slowing it down again. And so with this weather system that's in place, it's all everything is blueprint driven anyway, but what it's actually doing is picking up based on time what color to use, what to do with the fog, what to do with whether it's going to rain or not, whether it's going to snow or not. And it's kind of mostly random, and I've had to tweak it on and off here and there. But this is what it does. And I think we are at a higher speed still, which is why it suddenly changes like that. It should be a lot more gradual. Yeah, that's... I'll just pause that now. So I'm just pausing the time. That is... Yeah, I think this ice plane that I'm using just isn't culling right, or at least not being affected. Right, but if I pop down here, you can see. It's nice having just these sort of foggy coloured bits. It's not really by design. Like I picked the colours and tweaked them a bit over time, but what I find interesting though is when it is dark, these trees actually start looking more like green trees rather than the white icy trees that they actually are. And so yeah, while I do purposely fast forward through and try to pick out when the best shots are, it is what it does look like as well, or can look like. So if you're curious what this mess of a weather system actually is like, so I've got a colour curve for the atmosphere fog. I've got a calculation somewhere which I kind of worked out how to actually translate the angle that the sun rotation was at into a time of day, which is more or less midday is 1. It's not exact, but it's close enough, and it cycles around like that. So let's close these up. I realize you don't actually see the pop-ups in the stream, but that was just pausing for the pop-up. So there's both an exponential height fog, which is using this the height fog color curve, which is a little bit different, and then there's also the other fog. So atmospheric fog and a height fog. So they're similar. a little bit different. So the height fog is the one that's using all the volumetric fog. So that's where you get, I guess, more of the richness in there. Fog line, I don't think I'm using that at the moment. And I've got a slight coloration on the sun, mostly to handle when it goes to nighttime. Although I feel like this one should be much lower again. But now's probably the wrong time to change it. Yeah, I won't probably change it now. Alright, so we're using this weather. Now, this is going to be a bit of nightmare fuel again. A lot of my stuff is. But I don't need to worry about optimizing at the moment. What have we got? Nice weather system. Let's bring it over. And I'll just go to the construction first. So, there's lots of things happening here. Most of this is just tracking what position things were at and what they are next, so that way you can do smooth lerping between. It's got a reference to the main landscape, so that way if I start adding other ones, it knows which ones to use. It's got a game mode reference just to make it smoother to actually reference the same game mode. So on build, we're getting the directional light and checking if we've got the sun. If we do, then we're setting it as the target, setting all the other targets. So I've got a slight variation on the sky sphere. So it's the base of sky sphere, but I think I made it so you could lerp between one of the settings that you're not normally able to. That's just, yeah, the construction is basically just setting all this up and then defaulting how snowy it is to 2. I think that should be the snow amount actually. That feels like it's the wrong value. Maybe that's why it's been inconsistent. Anyway, it's always, I can check that later. I've got this to determine the sun position, so based on what the working time is, it's actually setting the rotator. Now, yeah, this is not terribly efficient. It'd be smarter to just have it automatically rotating based on that, but it does also mean I can just modify the time of day on the fly. And I think that's where it came about. So if you sleep in a bed, when it fast forwards a bit, it automatically moves the sun to the right spot. I've got this to select the weather target, which is just a way of saying based on what conditions we've got, so whether it's fog, clouds, if there's stuff, if it wants to run effects, it picks out if we're going to have strong rain, strong snow, or strong fog. I don't have a separate fog weather effect happening at the moment, so the idea being I could actually add some moving fog later. That's not happening yet, but it's in here. I think it's just to check to see whether we should be running, and so is this. Interfaces aren't really used. These are more just the fact that the weather system is set up as an interactive object, which means that it can be instigated by some other function call. I kind of use interfaces quite a bit. So class settings, have a look at the core interactive interface. So this is just the one that's put on everything that's interactive. So it means it can, instead of having to cast it to a particular type or check if it implements a function, or I can just trigger this off, say, okay, call the interact response on this object, here's some info, and if it can do something with it, it will do something with it. On start, we get our game mode reference, we do another check for the landscape. So that's when we check for the landscape. We set a new weather target, which is where it... here's the baby that controls everything, but we'll get to that. We set what time it was changed, whether enough weather effect happened, how long it's been elapsed for, and set the dilation. So that's the thing which is letting me fast forward it a little bit. Now there's a few other small things in here. Yes, I do have things happening on tick. It's disgusting, I know, but I don't know enough not to do it this way. I mean, I know that I shouldn't be doing it this way because everyone says, or most people say, don't put it on tick. But I put it on tick. So it's just doing the sun rotation, and yes, there are other things, or that also have their things happening on tick, but whatever. It updates the sun direction, so that's happening with the sky sphere. Maybe that's the one which was new. We're setting the checkpoint. We're updating if the weather effects are happening, so that's if it's rain, snow, or the fog that's not yet implemented. It updates that counter, goes through, gets a new weather target. Didn't we have that earlier actually? Oh no, that's on begin play. So that's only if we have passed enough time, and then we update the weather objects, which is where it's, I think that's the one where it goes through. Yes, that's the one that's doing most of the work. So back to the controls, what's this down here? So we've got our interact response. There we just check if we're being triggered by the story handler, which is a sort of a scheduling thing that says, based on data, if we hit a certain time in the game, to trigger off a particular weather effect. That's how it works at the moment. We've also got the option, well, that's doing the process fixed weather events, and these are just sample ones. They don't necessarily need to be the thing, but you got new storm, fog burst, or snowfall. Each of these has their own specific settings. So they've got cloud countdowns, which is how long the clouds are going to stay fixed for. It has the fog position, so it has predefined fog levels. It's got predefined cloud level, wind speed, which wind needs to be redone because at the moment if you modify the wind speed of a sky sphere while it's running, it actually starts moving clouds backwards while you're lerping through. Because it's updating based on what their position would have been if it was that old speed. Anyway, goes through, updates the sun temp, fog scattering, skylight, and then activates a weather effect, which is what triggers off the particle system. Alright, so what were the big ones? It's this, set new weather target. So we've got set new weather target and the update weather objects are the main two. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Would definitely suggest finding a smarter way to do this. If I zoom out, you can see it's got, like, it's messy, but it's also neat because there's boxes around everything, so you can ignore things and zoom into where you need to be. So to start with, cloud cover, it's saying, okay, we've got our working date, which is the actual game time, so the in-game, or the whatever time it is according to the sun, including what day. And this is saying, okay, based on what hour it is, are we more likely to increase or decrease? It's still random. And then we clamp it, so we have a maximum for what the cloud level can be. We set a countdown, which is to give it how long those clouds are going to stay like that. Do the same sort of thing for wind speed. That looks like it's much more random, but it's also small random changes over time. We've got these nodes to just redirect it to be neater. So what do we got here? We've got the fog multiplier. Again, we've got it say pick a random place. Now, if I remember correctly, what are we setting here? What are we? Oh, wait. It looks like we've got a missing link. It wasn't missing before. I'm very certain of that. Weird. Okay, interesting. Had something missing or broken. Let's do a comment. Anyway, after it does the fog stuff, goes back here to set up the fog colors. Let's fix this box as well. These do seem to be mostly based on like what time of day it is, so based on that color curve I showed before, but there is a slight chance, which I guess that's a 10% chance, that it's going to pick a random color instead. Or it's going to it's going to be a random offshoot of the chosen color by 0.2 either side, which, I mean, it's quite a change. Goes through, does the same for sun color. Very good. Fog density, again, it's more saying that between certain hours, so after 7 PM and before 4 AM, we're true, which means we're more likely to decrease. We're more likely to decrease the amount of fog. Other times it's either way, but we also clamp too. Same for volumetric fog. I mean, it's just really just picking things out, doing gradual changes rather than big massive changes. Interesting thing with the sun temp, if you actually set it to 3000, it looks like everything that's snow comes out like it's gold instead, so shiny. And for a while I wasn't sure why that was happening until I just started playing with other settings and found, oh, okay, that's what's changed in this particular instance. After it gets through everything, it does that check effect start to say, okay, are we running an effect, or are we meant to run an effect? And then we pick the weather target based on that conditions that I showed before. So if we're triggering effects, we kick that off, and it's all sort of done at the player level at the moment. when the extra fog levels come in, that will probably happen elsewhere, though it might still go via the player. And the other main one for the weather system was this update weather objects, just going through and just telling each object that it's got a reference to. So what's this? The sky sphere, the atmosphere fog, the height fog, and the sun and the skylight. Just telling them, okay, this is what setting you were at to start with, here's where you're going. See, it's not really using the scattering for the height fog. And then going through playing it on a transition just to gradually, it's just a straight curve there which is being used for the loop, and it's all pretty standard loopy stuff. There's a few cases where I've broken the links because I've started getting the data straight from whatever the setting was at the time. Some of the really old versions of this, they used to always lose whatever the setting was meant to be looping from, so you'd have abrupt changes all the time, but that's been fixed long time ago, in fact. And I don't think there's much else to it, like, I mean, I came across this sort of method by playing around with some other weather settings in a different game project, but there's nothing much to it. And even the way that it does the landscape transition is pretty much just standard looping on a timeline. Let's compile with that. What was it I changed? This one. So with the atmosphere fog relinked, and see there's a noticeable difference. Not really. Funny that actually the ice there being like that. Yeah, you can see actually a bit of the ice texture, the ice layer texture there too. So yeah, while I do like how this looks at the moment in terms of the material that we're using, it's just a nightmare to change, and I'm absolutely certain that I'm just being completely wasteful with the way it's set up. And it's probably been a while since I've shown much of this stuff, so right. First of all, you can see all these landslide bits there. I've actually got them hidden in the game now, but the idea being that when you go here, they would all start falling down. I've got the basics of a little dialogue system happening. I'll just pop into full screen. This is all controlled by data tables. And we have that. So all this stuff is what's controlling that conversation there. So we were just talking to this Bravos character. He's just made up standard names because I just wanted to give him some sort of name. I mean, this one doesn't really say it all come through. I don't think I've actually implemented the dialogue picker properly on this one, this character. But you can see it's got this to say, okay, this is all part of the same conversation. This is Bravos Conf 1. It's got the bit here which denotes what the next line is. In the case where it's got a branch, which is from that branch ID, it'll do that 2 options there. And then it's got a outcome, which in this case is delete response character, or delete character 1. And that will do this. So he drops in, tell him, you don't really exist. Oh no. And he's gone. Now, at the moment I've just got some background music which I'm assuming is coming through, but that's not from the game at all. I've got also the exterior windows just sort of change over time. The idea being that later I can actually have something that controls how foggy they get based, or how frosted they get based on what the weather conditions are, but at the moment they're not really being used, it's just going alert back and forth, so you just see that gradual change like that. Also seems like we're floating off the ground a bit here. I feel like that hasn't been put down. Now I don't have physics enabled on those 2 objects on the desk or that, but our foundation does seem like it's a little bit lower. So the reason I mentioned the music, I'm just going to stop it for a sec and just show off this. So I've got a little radio here. If I put the mic on, I talk here, I can actually, wait, ouch. That was something I set back when we didn't handle proper NPCs. Okay, let's just crouch down for a sec. So, doesn't really do anything other than move. I mean, well, I guess that's something. I've got these as well, so I don't have the auto exposure correction happening anymore, because when you do that with these sorts of ones which are done by that, it doesn't stay bright, everything else goes dark around it, especially when you then have these interior lights like that, which, no, that's not what it's going to be like later. But you basically have issues there. That's kind of nice though. Yeah. So first of all, I just noticed here, sometimes the snow particles come through. You can see it there too. I'm using distance fields to block when the particles fall, but they do seem to be a bit spotty on when they work and when they don't. But it is still much better than it used to be. Occasionally at times you would see them just fall through the kitchen here, and normally that was the roof not having excuse me, the roof not having the correct collision set, and it seemed like it kept going back and forth on when it would do it. So I'm gonna pop back to the radio. So I've got some music that I found. It just plays when you hit this radio button. Doesn't turn off. Please tell me the working title for this is Snowman Sky. It's not a bad idea. Originally the working title was Isolation, spelled the normal way, then it was Ice-elation. So I sometimes still call it that, but I also tend to not really refer to it by name at the moment. Anyway, if I hit the radio button again, this used to work. Get a blend to a different track. Now, I want that to be more of I don't know. I like if it was just something that was always running with an ambient soundtrack, but you could override it with the radio. And I'd like that these other settings actually did something, or maybe I were able to tune to a different station. The ladder seems a bit jerky lately. Speaking of snowmen, I did also want to have it that you could build a snowman. So the idea, you would collect little bits of ice like this. So this will do two things. So we got a big piece, although that looks like it just disappeared. So unfortunately the other snow piece disappeared, but that would have actually served two purposes. I'm going to just put that there because that's nice there too. Should I just take that? I don't know if that took. Anyway. Yeah, so the idea being you could actually clear the snow off those solar panels there to help restore the power, as well as actually being able to build a snowman. Let's build a snowman. We can make him our best friend. We can name him Tom, or we can name him George. We can make him tall, or we can make him not so tall. It's great. So there's seriously a lot of work to do on this still. And yes, I do spend most of it doing texture stuff for the landscape because they look so cool. And yeah, I've just paused the sun settings now just so I can go for a run like this. Because, you know, it's pretty. Yes, please do. Please get me a copy. I have heard of it. I just have not seen it. And yeah, one of the things I've found with it, like even just that, is nice. It's having a little bit of grass flopping around, even if it's icy grass or seemingly dead grass. Yeah, the more sort of variety you get repeated across the landscape like this, it just adds so much. Now, I'm not sure how many of you saw that concept art. I know quite a few did, but this is actually just some simple geometry shapes thrown together, then cut out, so BSP binary space partitions, some materials, so the same ones I actually use on the buttons back on that radio, to actually just add some extra glowy parts as well as some standout lights. And the idea being this is going to be one of the old stations. Or maybe it needs to be the main station, because I actually do like how it looks and like the overall feel of it, so can't go in there, but even that, just the glossiness, it's interesting. But yeah, the illusion is sort of shadowed. If I jump around the corner, and you can see all the back is just that default grey material. But I even took the time to make that little snow pile that's in the concept art over there. Make it slope down here for where the road would have been. So I think what's sort of become clear is the more I work on it, the more I have to work on it, but also I get a slightly different idea of how it should feel and what it could be. Let's speed back up again. That's always nice when the snow is probably my favourite part of the particles. I mean, it's choice of snow or rain, isn't it? That's nice. Anyway, that's probably all I'm going to do tonight. I think what I'll just also do, I did have that note I made on what I want the overall material to work like. So I've definitely got the basis of the current one. So I've got the basis of the rock layer. I would definitely want to make that same sort of stratification happen, but I also like the idea of blending back and forth between the snow and the rock texture, just to give it a cool sort of variation there. I must have stopped earlier. Oh no, here it comes. There. Yeah, at the moment the snow is just fixed to the player. The idea being, wherever you go, you're more likely to just have it follow you. But then you do get that sort of thing where if you move back to a different spot, it's not with you. And because it falls so slowly, you get that. So you see, we can see the stars for a moment. Do need to bring in some shortcuts to a start and stop weather effects. Mostly so I can take cool screenshots, because it's definitely becoming one of the highlights. I'm kidding, it was always one of the highlights. Yeah, I'll definitely wrap it up here. I'll also say, if there's anything you want me to show, like either that I've done on how to do it, or if you want me to try something, there's a few different things I've done. So let's kill that one now. Let's put the music back so it's not just my voice going. Here we go. So I mean, besides those main landscape materials, I've done some experimenting. So that's the frosted glass one. You can see it's doing noise and noise together and saying based on the values just blended in. And then has a Fresnel effect as well. There's a lot, probably too much going on with it. Got that. I've got a lot of stand-in textures as well, like sort of stand-in materials. So this poorly named purple stripe. I've got that's not the main. So I've got scratch stripe. That's the main one. Generated bands. They're brilliant. I love them. Here you've got that sort of glossiness. Someone saying it's UV maps. You can use that. This one is just something I sort of threw together when I was actually starting off one of those other noise layers. What it's doing is two different versions of the same texture being used to lerp and burn colour in. I forget what this one was. This might have been following a tutorial, or yeah, that was. And just that part alone is sorry, this part is pretty cool. Oh wait, I don't have my real-time stats on. There we go. That's why it was a bit jittery just then. This is when I discovered how you could actually do these bands on that. It's a bit hard to show on this particular texture. I mean, on this landscape. And this is when I actually help someone with. They could use this as a just a water layer. This looks very similar to the last one though. I changed it slightly. No, I just opened the same one, didn't I? Sorry, Wave Maker's one I helped someone with. So don't mind so much what's happening with the side layers, but here you've got like a very, very glossy wave. And then when you put that on a bigger piece of something, it's even smoother. So this bit here, prepare, perturb normal HQ and perturb normal HQ, it's really cool. And that's just using the generated bands to do that. Alrighty, anyway, thanks for watching. Hope it was either interesting or useful. If not, you know, just cool having you here. Very much appreciate it. So I don't have any fixed schedule for what my next Unreal stream will be, when it will be. Might be tomorrow, might not. If not, I'll probably jump into some No Man's Sky at some point again, or see what else strikes. So, cheers.